You ever see a headline that just makes your stomach drop and you start questioning everything in your kitchen? Yeah, we've all been there. Today, we are going to break down one of those scary headlines, a recent one about food preservatives and cancer. And to do that, we're going to walk through the critical analysis of food scientist Professor Lim. All right, let's get into it. So this was it. This was the headline or something just like it that popped up everywhere. It's short, it's punchy, and it is absolutely designed to grab your attention and, frankly, scare you a little. And look, it's based on a real study published in a major journal, so it got a lot of people worried. The question is, what's really going on behind that headline? Okay, so the claim came from this huge international study. We're talking over 100,000 people followed for years. And the big conclusion they reached was that some really common preservatives were linked to a higher risk of cancer. I mean, on the surface, that sounds really solid, right? 100,000 people. But as we're about to find out, the foundation that this whole claim is built on, well, it's got some serious cracks. To really get to the bottom of any study, you have to ask the most important question first. How did they get their information? This is where our investigation really kicks off, and it's where we find that first major issue with that scary headline. So here's the rundown. This massive group of volunteers, more than 100,000 of them, filled out a survey online every 6 months. And in that survey, they had to remember everything they ate and drank on 3 random days from the 2 weeks before. The researchers then used that information to guess their total intake of preservatives. And right away, that brings up a pretty obvious, very human problem. I mean, seriously, can you remember exactly what you had for lunch last Wednesday? What about the dressing on your salad? Or every single ingredient in that sauce? This entire study is banking on our memories being perfect, and let's be honest, they're not. You know, Professor Lin, the food scientist who took a deep dive into the study, he put it perfectly. He said, I can't even remember what I ate yesterday, let alone 2 weeks ago. And if a scientist struggles with that, what can we expect from tens of thousands of regular people? This method of data collection relying on memory is just famously unreliable. It's a recipe for shaky conclusions. Okay, but let's just pretend for a second. Let's say everyone's memory was flawless. You still have another huge problem here, something scientists call confounding variables. Think about it. Foods that have preservatives often have a ton of other stuff in them, right? Artificial colors, sweeteners, you name it. And the way you cook food can create its own chemicals. Plus, people who eat a lot of foods with preservatives might just have a diet that's also high in fat, sugar, and salt, things we already know can be linked to health problems. It becomes almost impossible to point the finger and say, aha, it was the preservatives. So the way they collected the data was questionable, to say the least. But what about the numbers, the actual statistics? Oh, this is where the story gets really interesting. Let's dig into how a tiny difference can get blown up into a terrifying headline. Here it is. This is the number that made the news. A 16% increase in risk. I mean, that sounds huge, doesn't it? That's the kind of number that makes you want to go through your fridge and just start throwing things out. But what does that percentage actually mean in the real world? Okay. So let's look behind that scary percentage. In the group of people who ate the least amount of preservatives, 3% were diagnosed with cancer during the study. Now, in the group that ate the most preservatives, that number went up to 3.5%. That's it. So that big, scary 16% increase is just the relative difference between these two very small numbers. Let's reframe that another way. The absolute difference between the two groups is just 0.5%. That's a difference of 1 extra case of cancer for every 200 people. Now, when you put it like that, the effect suddenly seems a whole lot smaller and a whole lot less alarming, doesn't it? But wait, we are not done digging yet. There's another clue hidden in the data that shows just how wobbly these findings really are. It's a super important tool called a confidence interval. And once you understand it, you'll see why it's a crucial piece of this puzzle. Think of a confidence interval kind of like a weather forecast. You know, if the meteorologist says there's a 30 to 70% chance of rain, you know they're not very sure. But if they say there's a 90 to 95% chance, you're definitely grabbing your umbrella. It's the same idea here. A wider range means the scientists are less certain about the result. And this is where it gets kind of wild. Take one specific preservative they looked at, calcium propionate. The study's own data, their own confidence interval, showed that it could potentially decrease your cancer risk by up to 9% or increase it by up to 10%. So, hold on a second. Which one is it? Does this stuff lower your risk or raise it?
When your range of possibilities includes both a pretty good benefit and a pretty bad harm, your results is basically meaningless. It's like a shrug in data form. It just tells you the numbers are so fuzzy that you can't draw any real conclusion. A finding like that should never, ever become a scary headline.
All right, there is one last absolutely critical piece of context that was completely missing from the headlines. And this right here changes the entire way we should be thinking about this topic. You see, preservatives aren't just some cosmetic ingredient to make food last longer on a shelf. That's not their main purpose. Their number one job, the entire reason they were invented, is to keep us safe from very real and sometimes deadly foodborne illnesses. So let's actually weigh the evidence here. On one side of the scale, you have this hypothesized, statistically shaky link to cancer from a single flawed study. On the other side, you have the proven, scientifically accepted life-saving benefits. Nitrites prevent botulism, a literal poison. Other preservatives stop dangerous molds and fungi from growing in our food. These are not small things. So the real trade-off isn't what the headlines suggest. What they're asking us to do is to consider giving up a proven, life-saving benefit to avoid a risk that is, being generous, statistically questionable and incredibly uncertain. When you frame it that way, the choice looks a lot different, doesn't it?
Look, the whole point of breaking this all down isn't just to debunk this one study. It's to give you the tools to think like a scientist the next time a scary headline flashes across your screen. Because trust me, there is always a next one.
So here it is, your critical thinking toolkit. Step 1, always question the data. How did they get it? Was it based on something unreliable like memory? Step 2, look for other explanations. What else could be going on? Step 3, put big, scary percentages in context. Ask, what's the absolute risk? And step 4, check for uncertainty. If the results could mean both good and bad things, they probably don't mean much of anything at all. So our final verdict on this story is pretty clear. While the intention behind the study, to encourage healthier eating, is a good one, the evidence they presented is just way too weak and far too uncertain to support the kind of fear that the headlines created. So I'll leave you with this thought. Now that you have this toolkit, the next time you see one of those alarming health claims, you won't just have to react with fear. You can react with curiosity. And you'll know exactly which questions to ask first.